Welcome back to the Perpetual Wealth Podcast, a show for clients of Paradigm Life. This season, we're empowering you to take control of your financial future using the core principles of the Perpetual Wealth Strategy. Now, before we dive in, a quick but essential disclaimer. While this podcast is primarily for our valued clients at Paradigm Life, it's open to anyone interested in enhancing their financial knowledge. However, please remember that our information should not be taken as a direct tax, legal, or financial advice. We strongly recommend consulting with a wealth strategist at Paradigm Life or your financial team before making any decisions based on our discussions. Today, we continue our journey into cash flow, protection, and wealth building, the foundational principles of the Perpetual Wealth Strategy. Let's dive in and explore how to optimize your wealth and achieve financial independence. Your journey continues now. Hey everyone, welcome back. We are going to be talking about the top 10 questions, inquiries that we get from you all consistently. And I have my good friend, colleague, Nick Welch with me. Nick has been with the organization for about 10 years, and he works with a lot of our existing clients. And since 2007, we've worked with about 8,500 people and counting. And it's really allowed us to see lots of different scenarios, situations. But also we get the same questions, right? So we're addressing those for you on this episode. So thanks for being here, Nick. Thank you for being here too.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.
So let's start with the first one. I think one thing that I remember early on is when clients commit to a permanent life insurance policy, right? It's forever, right? This isn't something like, oh, hey, let's try this out for a couple years, or so having this contract that's a forever contract, right? It's interesting, right? Because most people, even though they know that their mortality is going to be down the road, it's like paying to that. It's a different scenario that they face, right? And so obviously people naturally want to know, if this is for the rest of my life, how do I back out of this? What do I use this for? What if it doesn't work out?
Yeah.
Right. So those are very legitimate, important questions and concerns that people have. So how do you typically approach the question or the concern of how long do I have this for? How long do I have to pay this for? Because it's usually a question up front, but ultimately it becomes a question after a period of time, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we haven't done ourselves as an industry any favors with the product itself, because we look at these ledgers and you can tell that actuaries and bean counters have been running this product for as long as they have, because it can make your head spin when it comes to what are perceived as outlays that have to be made in perpetuity until you're 100 or 121 years old. And so the client's question is completely valid. And so based on how we design the product, there is going to come a time where premium outlays may not be required.
Out of pocket
outlays may not be required.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people want to know when that is possible.
Mm-hmm.
So we're able to show that, illustrate for them the possibility of ceasing contributions, because a lot of us, myself included, got involved with the product, started this because of the liquidity, the growth that this is able to provide us, the ability to access and utilize funds, create that banking system and idea. But life changes, and if we're stepping into a different phase of life and we're transitioning from this accumulation of assets to then living off of those assets, then maybe we might be looking at ways to reduce expenses. And of course, if it comes up, life insurance could fall into that category. And so knowing when that time is of when you're able to cease out-of-pocket contributions could be an important part of the conversation that you have with your advisor.
So usually the typical approach we use when we set up whole life is you put a lot into the PUA rider, right, which creates immediate cash value You do that for, a period of time, and the cash value grows, interest grows, dividends grow. Okay. And ultimately it gets to the point, right, where premiums don't have to come out of pocket. Now, I want to be clear, premiums are, regardless of the bead counters, premiums are required forever, right? On most policies. Sometimes policies, premiums are required to 90 years old or 100 years old. But typically the policies today, they're required until 121 years old, which means they're required forever, pretty much forever. Okay. However, that's the contract, but the flexibility that clients have, that policy owners have, to pay those premiums, okay, is what we're referring to.
Yeah.
Right. So I would say the first, flexibility is, the PUA rider. PUA riders are typically flexible riders where there's a minimum required and there's a maximum, right? The minimum is typically about $100, $120 a year, okay, to keep the rider open. And you can pay in max, you can pay in min, and anything, typically anything in between. Okay, so that's part of the flexibility. So in order to, I would say, reduce premiums, you can simply pay the minimum into the PUA rider. Now, as far as the base premium, that like required premium until you're, 121 years old, okay, that can come from a few, a few different sources. The first source is obviously out of your pocket. The second source is a loan, right? You can actually take a policy loan and pay the premium with that loan. Now, this is what I, during 2008, 2009, because I got, as I got into the, started Paradigm in 2007, I was really excited and, got policies on me and my wife and the kids. And then, 2008, 2009 hit, and I tell the story in the book, but I wasn't able to pay for a couple of years. And so I used loans to make premium payments, and I used, loans to cover expenses. It was awesome to experience that so early on. So there's tons of flexibility just depending on the situation that you're in. Because if it's a cash flow situation, typically cash flow situations are temporary. Okay. It's 6 months or 3 months or a year. And so not paying premiums, right, for 6 months, 7 months, a year, you could typically do that in the first couple of years of a policy. Now, indefinitely, that requires being in the policy and funding it at kind of a maximum level for probably 7 years, 10 years, just depending on the situation.
Yeah. But the reality is that it's possible. And whether it's temporary or whether it's permanent, the fact that you have been able to experience that personally, a lot of people haven't or don't want to, of course. But, again, life doesn't always operate in a vacuum. It doesn't go exactly as planned. And so knowing that we've got the ability to reduce, cease contributions, and possibly even make up for missed contributions later on down the road, that flexibility is extremely important for complementing whatever life is bringing us.
So that's from if there is disruption to cash flow, if there is temporary reason to cease contributions or put off contributions, premium payments. Okay, that's kind of what we've just answered. But let's get into another variation of that question, where I look at, again, the conditioning that we're all subject to, right, in the United States from a financial perspective. A premium, like 99 times out of 100, I was going to say 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100 is usually a cost, right? I pay a lot of, business insurance premiums, like cybersecurity premiums, officers and directors premiums. I pay liability premiums. Like there's a lot of money I pay into pure risk mitigation, right? That type of risk. Plus I have, really big term policies as well, which are essentially paying for pure risk. But looking at a premium that goes into either your base premium or your PUA premium, that is not a pure risk. Let's expand on that quickly, because usually clients come to us and they associate their premiums with an expense.
Cost, exactly, because that's how we've been conditioned to look at insurance, is through the lens of it being a cost, and it being an important cost so that it can indemnify a particular potential risk that exists in our lives. Life insurance, whole life insurance, overfunded whole life insurance does that, but it also has some other benefits as well.
Yep. So those are the wealth benefits, right? Because obviously it's accumulating cash value. It's also it's not paying for a possible risk, right? Such as, let's say it's cybersecurity insurance for a business. Okay. That you're paying a premium in the event that there's some sort of cyber compromise. Okay. If that never happens, it's a pure risk, right? Or it's a cost. If it happens, right, it's awesome because we know a lot of business owners where that has happened, and having that type of insurance, right, covers a lot of expenses that most businesses are not prepared to make or pay for. But the inevitability of mortality, like we have not figured out a way to escape mortality, and maybe someone figures it out. Who knows, right? Well, that's another conversation. Okay, but this is an inevitable event, right? So is it a pure risk? I'm going to say no, it's not. Like it is an inevitability. So you're not paying, right, for something that may or may not happen. You're paying for something that will happen. And ultimately you're financing your legacy, right? You're upfront, if you're younger, you're paying for something with, seed, right? And ultimately having a big harvest that is guaranteed at the end of the line, whether that's 2 years down the road or 75 years down the road.
That's exactly right, because it's going to happen.
And then you have the cash value side of things, right? Which is the equity, right, of that inevitable death benefit that pays out. And you have access to that equity throughout your life.
Exactly. You mentioned equity financing. There are many similarities between how the asset class of life insurance functions and how a mortgage functions. So as I mentioned to clients, as morbid as it might sound, imagine that we're financing the value of your life over a period of time. But as time goes on, we're growing equity. We've got this liquidity. And if you look at like a typical vanilla whole life insurance policy, that's really how it functions. Is they've got this really slow growth of equity, and eventually there's enough equity that
Cash value,
the cash value kind of equals the death benefit. But we use that as the underlying chassis of the policies, and then we chunk in those extra overpayments, which accelerates the growth of and the liquidity of the cash value. It also increases the death benefit as well.
Yep. So again, how we're approaching this topic, right, and the question that we get, there's not this like clear, this is the answer, right? It really comes down to the situation that you're in. So if you find yourself asking this question, like how long do I have to pay into this? Obviously, this is where we have a conversation. We evaluate kind of where things are out, what the genesis of the question is. Is this a cash flow challenge where you need, temporary, relief, and we can essentially have policy loans or reduce PUA? There's different ways in which we can appease this situation. But there's also those that really look at, this financial vehicle as something that's like temporary and is essentially playing one role in their financial life. So having a conversation as far as how this financial product plays a role throughout your life, that is very, very important. So based on whatever your situation is, this is where it behooves you to reach out to your wealth strategist or communicate with our client servicing team. And talk through what's going on so we can assist you to make the best decision possible.
Exactly. I always initially illustrate for my clients the policy being paid for maybe a 10 to 15 year period of time, because we might be able to wrap our minds around a decade. I mean, think about where you were 10, 15 years ago. Like, life evolves. So that's usually what I illustrate, but you can pay for longer, you can pay for shorter, you can increase and you can decrease contributions. And so related to the question of how long do you have to pay premiums is another question I get quite frequently, which is, how long can I pay premiums?
So it's a much different variation of the
because most people, once they understand the value that this asset class brings, if you get into the mental headspace that I have, you're going to get to the point where it's like, how much can I stuff into it, and for how long am I able to? And the answer to that question, there are a couple of different answers to that question. We're under the insurance company's limitations. We're also under IRS and regulatory limitations. So that's where, like you said, get with your wealth strategist to understand the answer to that question, which is how much, as well as how long am I able to contribute? because there could be, whether it's the insurance company or the IRS, there could be some restrictions as to how much and how long you're able to continue to pay those
And
premiums.
it's typically per policy.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. All right, let's so thanks for listening to this kind of short episode based on this, question that we get quite often. So again, it requires obviously a conversation to understand your context, the situation you're facing, and ultimately helping you make the best decision. So thanks for watching.